Good afternoon. What would you think if I told you hunting and wildlife conservation can go hand in hand? I'd imagine you think I'm crazy. And you're probably asking the question, how? And now my reasoning. The United States has a long and storied history of both hunting and conservation efforts, and believe it or not, they share a lot of the same energy. I will talk about how a once necessary chore, so to speak, to survive has become a cherished tradition for many American families, along with how hunters lead the conservation efforts in North America and beyond. To understand, we first must look back to the early days of our country and beyond. For thousands of years before our country was founded, hunting was a necessary activity used by Native American tribes. Not only was hunting a successful part of our history, hunting was a part of survival. But many tribes were also had a deep spiritual connection to the wildlife that inhabited the land, such as deer, elk, waterfowl, and aquatic life. They've sustained the needs of the communities for thousands of years. Many tribes would use nearly every part of the animal, such as the hide for making clothes or banquets, to stay warm during the winter months. Also, animal bones could be shaped and sculpted into tools, such as knives or picks. When the settlers arrived from Europe in the early 1600s, they brought a new meaning to hunting in a way. Although hunting was still a necessary activity to provide a food source, colonists also went hunting for recreation. To the colonists, hunting was a way that they could get a sense of self-reliance, freedom in the newfound world, which they had just found. Not long after the vast resources of North America were fully understood by the colonists, it led to a start of commercial hunting for wildlife such as beaver, whose hides were used for coats, and they were greatly valued by people in the cities or even back across in Europe. During the era of expansion of the United States in the 1800s westward, newfound hunting lands were discovered with the vast populations of bison, for example. Also during this time, technological advancements in things such as firearms made hunting much, much easier to the average citizen. The prevalence of commercial hunting, also known as market hunting, which means hunting for a profit rather than personal use, became widespread. Animals such as bison were killed in very large numbers to send back east to sell in cities for either food or also as luxury items. The direct result of the large bison numbers killed led to a near extinction of the American bison population, which had once been in the tens of millions. By 1899, it was reduced to less than 1,000. Around this time, there was no hiding the fact that unregulated hunting could not be a sustained practice for much longer, without the total annihilation of many of the species that roamed the land. Out of this so-called dark period of time, where many of the game animal species were in decline, some on the brink of extinction, a conservation movement was born. And to circle back to my first point, many of the early leaders were hunters themselves. A notable leader of the early conservation movement was our president, Theodore Roosevelt. He was an avid hunter and outdoorsman, and he was recognized that America's wildlife were in danger, and he could help. He helped create the U.S. Forest Service and established 5 national parks and advocated for millions of acres of land to be used as national forest and wildlife refuges. Around this time, many organizations such as the Boone and Crockett Club, founded by Theodore Roosevelt and a fellow hunter, George Grinnell, put out a new idea that it was called fair chase, and promoted that hunting should be ethical and done in a way to preserve the wildlife population for future generations to enjoy. As far as government goes, they lobbied for laws to go against commercial hunting and wanted more scientific-backed wildlife management to be done. And at the turn of the 20th century, there was an even bigger push for conservation at the federal government level. One of the most notable was the 1937 Pittman-Robertson Federal Aid Act, and this act placed a tax on firearms, ammunition, and other such hunting equipment, with the funds going directly to state-level wildlife agencies for habitat restoration, research, and public access to hunting land, which raised billions of dollars for conservation. Also, hunting licenses and stamps, such as the yearly federal waterfowl stamp, were created, which is needed to hunt waterfowl in the United States legally, and has brought in over $1 billion to the wildlife conservation efforts throughout the 1900s up until today. Many organizations such as the National Wild Turkey Federation and Ducks Unlimited have been able to establish to turn around the decline of our wildlife populations from the brink of extinction not too long ago. They do that by lobbying for common sense hunting regulations along with habitat conservation, which is a big problem in today's world with the expansion of the suburbs and a higher population. Today, hunting remains both a recreational activity and a conservation tool, although far fewer Americans hunt today compared to 100 years ago. The impact of hunters on conservation is still significant. There is a model that the United States goes by, which is the North American model of wildlife conservation, which is renowned and is built on the principles such as that wildlife belongs to citizens and it should be managed by science. Today, hunting holds a strong tradition in many families' culture. It is about having wild, free form of a food source that is not affected by some of the chemicals or genetic modification that has been done within our food industries. And many people find peace in the outdoors and hunting and getting away from our much fast-moving world that we live in today. Thank you.